Good morning or afternoon. I am back today to talk about your final assignment for Module 2, which is Module 2C, Assignment 2C. You can see on my page, I'm here back at your N6105 Canvas page under Modules. So we have worked through 2A and 2B, and this is 2C. So I want to click on Module 2 Overview just to show you something quickly. So again, the recommendation is that you go through the key ideas, the objectives, the readings. There's lots of good references here on the theories, which is what we're going to be talking about today for 2C. And then there's also some video resources and PowerPoints. So your assignment for 2C, I'm just going to, well, I don't have to click it open because it's right here. So identify and describe a conceptual model and framework that can be used to explain the relationship for variables in your question. Describe how the concepts are defined in the model, how it will apply to your review, and then the expected relationships. So one thing that is clear, and I want y'all to be aware of, is that you don't have to use a nursing model. So you can, and we've been taught and educated over the years about the various nursing models that are very common. And so if those fit with your research question and that's what you want to use and that's appropriate, then that's perfectly acceptable. This would be a good opportunity, though, for you to go outside of the nursing discipline and see what other disciplines are using. So either way is fine. And so I have an example of a nursing one and a different one from another discipline that we can talk about. So the first one is the same study from yesterday that I believe we talked about. Oops. This is the paper that was published in 2011 by a student and faculty from this course. And so again, it is the effects of self-management education for school-aged children on asthma morbidity. So this published paper is the paper that's actually most close to the one that you're writing here. So we went over this. They have the introduction, they have the background and significance, and then she goes and talks about the theoretical framework. So I want to also mention that, and I talked about this yesterday, how journals are all different and they have different requirements and they have different priorities, and certainly they have page limits and they have word limits for the journal and for each individual article. So unfortunately, you might submit a 6,000 word article and they're only allowed to print 4,000 words. And of course, it all has to do with money. So then they have to decide what needs to be deleted. What can they do without? So unfortunately, that is often the theoretical framework when we're talking about review papers. So you may not find too many other examples of the theoretical framework, how it's written, because often they're deleted just because of the word limits and the page limits. So let's look at the one that the student chose to use here. So she chose the health promotion model that I'm sure everybody's familiar with. And so I want to just kind of go through what she wrote, because she really wrote it exactly towards the rubric in terms of how to explain it. So she just starts out saying that the health promotion model can be used to examine self-management education programs, particularly in school-based programs. So the first requirement, let me pull that up again. Describe the conceptual model. Okay, so that's what she did. She took each part, starting at this sentence, the health HPM is a guide to look at the social and cognitive processes that motivate people to engage in behaviors that enhance their own health. The main concepts are individual characteristics and experiences, behavior, specific cognitions, and behavior outcomes. So then she goes on to talk in more detail about each one of the concepts that are in the model. So individual characteristics, behavior, and then the third one was behavior specific cognitions and then behavior outcomes. So she talked about each one of these. And so I think it's good to note that she talked about it just in general, just how it is, without it being related to her study or her interest at first. So, and then she took a lot of time to do that. She took this whole entire paragraph to explain to the reader so that they know what it is. Then she moves on to say, the next thing is, how is that important to me and what I'm interested in? So the HPM is a functional tool to reference when you deliver health education. So then she talks about that and how this is a tool for her goal, which is the education. So, and then she ties it in when asthma self-management education is provided to children in school, each child will bring their own individual personality traits, culture, social, and past experiences. And so that really speaks to her specific interest and how that relates to the general interest of the model and what the model in general is trying to convey. Based on the HPM model, you have to take into account unique characteristics and experiences, and that promotes a person's self-efficacy, which of course is a big piece of this as well. So then she goes in to talk about self-efficacy and really explains that and what that is and the influence that it has on people being successful in their own care. So here she says it really good in this one paragraph. Self-efficacy is one of the strongest predictors of health promotion. If the school-based asthma self-management education succeeds in increasing the self-efficacy of children 5 to 17 years old, there should be an increase in compliance with asthma treatment plans, thus increasing asthma disease control. So that's a really good sentence that sums it all up on how, what the HPM is and how her interest fits perfectly into it. And so then she even goes on more detail about how asthma control should result in decrease in missed days of school, numbers of trips to the ED, and she just keeps on going. And it's just more support for her case of what she wants to say. So I think this is a really good example for you if you want to use it as a template to follow. I think you would be just fine in doing that for the purpose of this paper. So let me show you another one. Now this is what I used, so yesterday I was talking about the, loneliness and cognitive function systematic review. So this is the model that I used as the theoretical background. And so this model in my paper is not there. This was one of the sections that the journal cut, and it's not there for anyone to see. So I just wanted to give you another example of one that's also outside of nursing. So this came from a psychoneuroimmunology background. And I would start out by explaining what it is. So you have here the psychosocial domain, you have an individual domain, you have an environmental domain, and a behavioral domain. So the whole purpose of this model is to give you examples of different variables that could influence the biological domain that ultimately influence the health outcomes. So, for example, in the psychosocial domain, she has here listed stress, emotions, social support, coping, spirituality. These are examples of different psychosocial variables. So it's meant for the author or the person who's wanting to apply this to their study or their review to be able to put their own psychosocial variable there. So for me, that's what I did. I put loneliness. So loneliness is the psychosocial domain that I was most interested in. And then you can tell by these arrows that it can loneliness then could interact with other variables, or it could just directly influence the biological domain. So then here, there's also immune, endocrine, CV, pulmonary. So then for me, it was biomarkers of stress and inflammation is what the loneliness was thought to influence. And then that ultimately influenced the health related outcomes of cognitive function. So, another thing to say about this model, and this you might come across this as well, um, I didn't have to address all of these domains. So, if you were really going to have a study that addressed psychosocial, individual, environmental, behavioral, that would be really big. And, it is possible, but it's not really possible within the boundaries of this course. So, and then also for most people. So when I did this work, I was doing my dissertation. So I couldn't choose, it couldn't be this big, gigantic um, study or interest. It really needed to be just one small piece of something that I could build on later. And that would be a good reference for what you're doing here. Take something small and simple. One, it's your very first time to do something like this for most of you. And second of all, the course is not very long. And so we really have to be able to fit it within the boundaries of the course and the time and all of those factors. So again, I was able to just say psychosocial domain, biological domain, and health outcomes. And then maybe over time, as I built more and more evidence, then I could include an individual domain or an environmental domain or something. So that's really just kind of my experience with this one model that's from psychoneuroimmunology. And so I just wanted to see how you can go outside of nursing and find another model and make it work for what you want to do. So um, at this point, I think we are finished with Module 2. So you should be on your way with your introduction, background, and theoretical framework. So good luck with everything, and don't hesitate to reach out to your faculty if you have any questions. Thank you.